Welcome back to the Pope Physical Education Center. Seth Cantor joined by renowned sports columnist for the Washington Post, John Feinstein, as the Terriers here at the half have a lead over Fairleigh Dickinson. John, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here, and thank you for turning up the headphones so I can hear you. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. So I know you're doing a piece on each of the 5 original Division I schools that haven't made the NCAA tournament. Where did you get the idea to do these pieces?
You know, it came from being understanding, following college basketball as I do, how close some of the schools have come. I remember the game back in 2004 against Monmouth that I know people around here don't like to bring up, the 20-point lead in the championship game. And I knew, because of my relationships with Bob Knight and Mike Krzyzewski, that Army had turned down a bid in 1968, back when the NIT was really just about as big as the NCAA was now. And then 2 years ago, I was at the CAA final. William and Mary had a 6-point lead with 1:20 left and lost the game by 1. And the pain I saw in those kids' eyes at the end of that game, everybody from William and Mary's eyes, I said, this is something that's tough to deal with, and wanted to know more about it. And it's been remarkable in doing my research. It's going to run in 5 different parts in the Washington Post. Everybody's got a different story. And St. Francis's story is as unique as any. And you know what happened last year. You were here for that championship game when they came so close after winning the regular season. And so it's been really fascinating just to find out how each school is different in terms of its approach to its history and also in how the history evolved. Northwestern hosted the first national championship game and another Final Four and has never been in the tournament. So everybody's got a story to tell.
We're joined by John Feinstein of the Washington Post. I know you had some time to spend with Glenn Bryka before the game. What were your impressions of him?
Well, I had a long talk with Glenn on the phone last year because I did a column on St. Francis when they were on their way to winning the regular season because of the possibility that they might break through. And Look, I relate to New York guys. I'm a New York guy, so I think we hit it off right away on the phone last year. So it was nice to sit down with him in person and also to sit down with Ron Ganulin and talk to him and some of the kids. And I love the attitude. Look, we're just going to keep working. We're going to play as well as we can. We're going to get as good as we can. And when it happens, it happens. And I think that's the best approach to take.
First time here at the Pope Physical Education Center. What are your impressions of the gym?
I love old gyms like this. I enjoy the atmosphere. I'd love to see the place full. If you guys are ever in a championship game again, I promised Glenn I would make it here for the championship game because I know what the atmosphere was like here last year just from watching on television. And as I said, being a kid who grew up in Manhattan, my dad's from Brooklyn, it's a lot of fun to be here.
There's so many teams nationally that could compete for the national title this year. You have Oklahoma, North Carolina, Villanova. How many teams are out there do you think that can compete for this championship?
I would say at least a dozen. And you know, for example, you look at a team like Wichita State that is ranked, 19th this week, I think. They had injuries early in the season, lost several games, dropped completely out of the rankings, and now nobody in the Missouri Valley can touch them. You remember a few years back, they were in the Final Four. They're good enough to get on that run. There are a lot of teams that are good enough to go in as a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seed even and make it to the Final Four. Kentucky, remember, it was 2 years ago, Connecticut a 7 and Kentucky an 8 played in the national championship game. Last year was kind of an exception to the rule because you had the dominant team in Kentucky, and then Duke and Wisconsin were clearly so good in March. But I think this year's completely different. We had 2 number 1s and a number 2 in the Final Four. Michigan State was a 4. This year, it wouldn't shock me at all to see it go back to being a 7, an 8, a 5, a 3, whatever.
We're joined by John Feinstein of the Washington Post. What do you make of the local landscape? Obviously, Chris Mullen has his hands full with the young St. John's team. Seton Hall, Rutgers, I know it's going to be tough for them in the Big Ten. What do you make of what's happening here in the New York metro area?
Well, you guys almost beat St. John's. I saw that game on television in the Garden early in the season. The reason Chris got the job is because people think he'll be able to recruit because he's Chris Mullen. And that'll be the key. Recruiting is the key for anybody. If he can get good enough players, the kind of players that played when he was there, or more recently on some of their good teams, then St. John's can come back. St. John's is always going to be the power team in this city when they're good. Seton Hall, I think Kevin Willard's done a nice job. I mean, they're starting 5 sophomores, and they had some good nights. They had a good win the other night. I think they've made a lot of progress. I just think Rutgers is overmatched in the Big Ten. I really do. I think they're overmatched in football and in basketball. Maryland is clearly overmatched in football. Not so much in basketball, obviously, because they came out of the ACC and they've always been a very good basketball school. But right after Maryland and Rutgers announced that they were going into the Big Ten, I ran into David Stern, who is, as you know, a Rutgers grad. And he said to me, "What are they doing?" And I said, "They want the money." He said, "It's child abuse." Now, that might have been a little bit hyperbolic, but he wasn't that far off, particularly in football.
If you look at Rutgers, do you think it's easier for them to be more competitive quickly in football or basketball?
It should always be easier in basketball because you only need to recruit 2 or 3 very good players to turn a program around. And Eddie Jordan, being an alumnus, being a guy who played and coached in the NBA, that should matter going into a home. He should be able to get some good players. They've got one great freshman this year. What did he have, 39 the other night against Illinois? I know it's triple overtime, but 39 is 39. But yes, it should be easier in basketball. Plus, the Big Ten, especially playing in the Big Ten East, where you've got to play Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State every year. Seriously? I just don't see it.
We're joined by John Feinstein of the Washington Post. Couple more questions. What do you think the biggest issue affecting college basketball is today?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's the one and done. I think it needs to go away. I think they should force the NBA or demand that the NBA make it more of an issue with the players' union because it is an NBA rule, as you know. The one and done makes a mockery, complete mockery of academics. I mean, you know that after the first semester, the kids don't even have to go to class at all. I think they should go to the baseball rule. If you're that good, if you're Ben Simmons coming out of high school, go in the draft the way Kobe Bryant did, Kevin Garnett did. If you're not good enough to get drafted and become a millionaire right away, then go to college, but you got to stay 3 years, like in baseball. Once you enroll in college, you can't go back in the draft for 3 years. At least that way, the kids who aren't going to be multimillionaires, they're somewhere close to a degree because of academic progress rules.
I know you're an accomplished author. What has been your favorite work?
My favorite book is a book I did on the Army-Navy football rivalry 20 years ago now, called The Civil War, because the kids who play football at Army and Navy are so extraordinary. And my most famous books, obviously, are Season on the Brink and A Good Walk Spoiled. But I have a book coming out March 1st on Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, and Jim Valvano on their rivalries and their relationships. That was as much fun as any I've ever done because I knew all 3 of them very well in the 80s when they were competing against one another. I was the ACC writer for the Washington Post in those days and couldn't talk to Jim or Dean now, but I spent many, many, many hours with them when they were both still alive and got to spend a lot of time with Mike Krzyzewski during the course of researching this book. And Jim and Dean's wives were very helpful, and brothers. Bob Valvano, who coached here once, as you know. So it was a great experience for me. And the book's called The Legends Club. It'll be out March 1st, and it was really fun.
What's your Super Bowl prediction?
My Super Bowl prediction is that I want the Broncos to win, but I think the Panthers will win. I just would love to see Peyton Manning go out in glory. I don't want to see him go out with a Super Bowl like the one 2 years ago against the Seahawks. He deserves better, not only for the career he's had, but for the person he's been for so long.
John Feinstein, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. John Feinstein from the Washington Post. We'll take a break. We'll come back with the first half stats and the Northeast Conference scores on the Terrier Sports Network.